Hello, everyone, and welcome to week 2 of Algorithms of Oppression. We are certainly getting into the books now, and there's Chris. This is part of the Metagame Book Club, and we are also working with ISTE Games and Sims Network. If you're just starting out, please go to the front page of the Metagame Book Club and just start with our intro, and you can work your way through. This week, again, we have a lot of things going on. This is the intro webinar. We have the pages up that you'll be reading with Algorithms of Oppression. And if you want to dive into surveillance capitalism, we have what we're covering there too. On our pages, there's some additional viewing, and we'll be doing a slow tweet chat and a discussion on Reddit. So a slow tweet chat means you have all week to answer those Twitter questions.
All right, we'll jump into the key concepts and constructs for this week. So first off, we revisit data justice. So remember, this is fairness in the way people are made visible, represented, and treated as a result of their production of digital data. And the 3 pillars are there, and this is from Taylor 2017, are invisible or invisibility. I should say invisibility or visibility, disengagement or engagement with technology, and anti-discrimination. So what we see is this week we talk a lot about data injustices, as Heeks and Renkins have nominated them. These are harmful consequences, whether intended or not. So things like surveillance, in other words, are we invading privacy, reinforcement of monopoly and stereotypes that are there, loss of privacy. Again, goes back to that surveillance piece. Is the more we're surveilled, the more we are tracked and our data is used, basically the more transparent we as a group of people become. And then there's algorithmic profiling, these things where you're using algorithms to create negative impacting. So we'll talk a little bit about it. We talk about redlining in some different aspects of that, which is negative lending practices that have been illegal. Invisibility or visibility. So what you see here is, despite the data being anonymous in the sense of being de-individualized. So what happens is, in research, we get your data, if you volunteer for a survey or something like that, they take away your name, they give you a pseudonym, so it could be like respondent 1 or respondent 335 or whatever. And the idea is that you take away that personally identifying information, and then we make you anonymous. However, as we get bigger and bigger data sets, the group as a whole becomes more transparent. So in other words, we get a better idea of your motivations as a whole. So what we mean by grouping, it just depends on the data splice. It could be white males, it could be white females, it could be women living in Colorado, it could be men living in Pittsburgh. Lots of different ways to slice and dice the data to go ahead and play around with it. Disengagement or engagement with technology. So are we going to be working for smart machines, or will we have smart people around the machine? And so we see this here. The idea is, how are we going to work? Are we going to have our lives run by a machine? Or are we going to be like really smart people and know how to use technology and how to selectively allow ourselves to be tracked and tagged and microchipped on our devices, and not share that information that we don't want to be sharing? So this is some things to we'll be discussing this week. And then, of course, anti-discrimination. So I talked about redlining before, and this is the idea of using data to discriminate where lending to particular ethnic groups. So the key thing to remember about redlining is, it's not about refusing to lend to a specific ethnic group. What it is that's the end result. The end result is that you don't get a loan if you're a certain ethnic group. But the reasoning for why you were refused is due to the circumstances of the community in which you, or the ethnic group in this case, lives. And the idea is, it could be crime rate, it could be default rate, it could be low income, it could be low property values. Things like that are reasons why you're not considered a good investment. And so this is one of the challenges that we see, especially as we move towards more and more data and using data to make decisions about individuals, is you start seeing these unanticipated consequences where you're starting to see, certain ethnic groups get focused on as always being rejected for certain services, and it's allegedly it's due to something else, but when you look at it, it seems that it's not. It seems to be very targeted in shape. So the other thing about anti-discrimination we talk a little bit about in this week is how easy it is to make corrections of errors in your data. So one thing to think about is as we're building all of these databases on top of one another, and then we're running all of these sorts, and what happens when someone makes a mistake? What happens if your data gets messed up with someone else's data and you don't know about it, but all of a sudden you start not fitting your normal profile and you start getting things either negatively impact. Most people don't complain about positive impacts. Most people complain about the negative impacts that are showing up. So that might happen. How easy is it for you to correct these errors and identify these errors? Data harvesting is talked about a lot about this week. So, oh, Mr. Big, the idea is with data harvesting is that it's a systematic collection, analysis, and development of business strategies to monetize users' data. So this is what it's all about. It's all about taking all that free information that you do on your mobile devices and on your browsers and everything else, where when apps want to get access to your contacts, they want access to your GPS location to triangulate your data. I just got one yesterday to give me an update saying, hey, we found a newer and more effective way to triangulate your location. Do you want me to activate this? No, I don't. But that's me. The thing is data harvesting is gathering that information and figuring out how can you make money, how can businesses make money off of that. Develop marketing strategies, developing sales strategies, developing ways to get you to buy product out of it. That's what data harvesting is all about. It can also have I guess you can say, beneficial effect with education, where we're trying to find ways that we're harvesting our students' data and we're trying to find more effective ways to help students be more successful and to graduate faster and to be more successful in their classes, be more successful in completing their degrees, and being more successful in transferring into other areas. Again, that is a systematic collection and analysis of data. The difference is we're not necessarily developing business strategies. We're developing learning strategies and instructional strategies. However, the cynics among us may also say, well, aren't we technically looking for ways to keep students enrolled longer and take more classes, especially those students that might drop out earlier, as opposed to try to get our non-completers to stay in longer to complete? Well, that's up to you to decide what it is. But we're gonna take the altruistic view there. We're trying to help people. Next up is Google Ads search engine optimization. This is something we talk a lot about. We get to read a lot about in this these chapters coming up. So, what are we talking about? Google AdWords. So, now rebranded as Google Ads. I guess it's nicer than AdWords. And this is where Google has made most of their revenue. The simple idea is that you can create an account and you have a web page. Ideally, you'll have a web page, and you will go ahead and you will bid. So you'll say you're going to pay X cents per click or X dollar per click on your keyboard. And so you bid for these keywords and these phrases that are used in search engines. So what I mean by that, so if you type in, like as in this book, you talk about black girls, you talk about, so anything, calico cats, crying husky, anything you want to go ahead and search, anything you might search for, the way the search engines work is they break those into keywords and phrases. And so you, as a website owner, can bid if you have an account. Well, you don't have to be a website owner, you just have to have an account. You can bid and you can pay money for your link and your advertisement to show up. And so where do they show up? Well, on this image here, you'll see it says ad right underneath in the little green area underneath the blue header. And so these are ads. That means these are paid ads. If I click on this ad, then the person who owns this ad, who created this ad, will have to pay Google money for me clicking on it. And the idea is, of course, as you own a website, you're going to get traffic to your website, and hopefully you'll generate business off of this. If you're an educator, you want and you're doing this, it's because you're going to a nonprofit, or you're going to your professional blog or your professional website, and you're trying to get more readership and help build your awareness about you and your research. So again, so it can be for business purposes, or it could also be for networking, business networking. So people are going ahead and they are bidding on these keywords. You can also go ahead, you set up a budget. Once you set up what your amount per click is, you set up a budget. You can set geographic restrictions on it. So you can say only people in Denver, Colorado will see this ad, and you'll bid for that. As you get more specific, the cost per click goes up, because you're becoming more and more, allegedly these clicks are more valuable because you're hitting a more targeted group. And so SEO is the flip side of this. SEO is search and optimization, is taking your website and how do you make your website show up better on a search engine. And so there's lots of companies out here that'll gladly have you pay them to come in and redo your website, and they'll do, and the book talks a lot about some, we'll call them gray hat practices about going ahead and how do you generate and increase your clicks and your relevance and your ranking in websites that are set up. So the idea is that you have these two pieces. You have people spending money to try to get these ads in front of you, and then you have folks trying to optimize their website. So when you search those terms, their website will show up a higher ranking. And how you tell the ones that are ads is because there's a little ad thing, which Google just added. Like they added probably, I think, 3 years ago, or so 3 to 5 years ago. They just finally started putting ads there. And then down here at the very bottom, you'll see there's one here that doesn't have the word little button ad in front of it. And that tells you it's the actual website. It's the first result on the website, which hopefully Google, doing a website about its AdWords campaign, would be the #1 non-advertised website that would show up. But what's interesting is it is the #1 page. It's also the #1 ad. So even Google itself has created a budget to go ahead and bid for its area. But look down here, you have another company coming in that says, hey, look, if you click on this, we'll help you achieve your marketing goals. And that's part of the things they do, is help you set up your AdWords, as well as other things. So the other thing you do for AdWords is you get to do these little blurbs down here at the bottom that people can read real quick underneath the URL here. Now I'll turn it over to Kay to talk about critical studies.
Okay, I'm just putting out that, again, this is part of what we're doing here. We're looking at it. Algorithms of Oppression is us looking at it from a critical studies view. And the author of this book is a professor. She has a background in library and information science, and she is looking at it from a Black feminist viewpoint. And the thing, when it comes to critical studies ask questions. It always asks who benefits and who does not, and what we can do about these inequalities. And just another reminder, something else that the author definitely is writing from this perspective, and that's intersectionality. And she put it right in the front of the book that she is looking at race and Black and girls, so Black girls. And remember that intersectionality means there's an intersection of discrimination or disadvantage. So it's not just one way, it's they cross over and they form something different. Now, a lot of what we're doing in this second group of readings is the author is really kind of myth busting that technology is race and gender neutral, and the stories about technology are race and gender neutral. And we put some things up here, so if you'll go to that, that's great. And one of the things, well, not explicitly mentioned, one of the things the author does get talking about is really colorblind racism. And it's a lot like when Chris described redlining and how algorithms are used for redlining, where you don't say it's race, but it's got to be these other factors. And that's a lot of what colorblind racism is. It's an avoidance of talking about race or framing racial issues, and instead saying, oh, no, it's not that. It's because people are poor. Or no, it's not that. It's a cultural thing. So colorblind racism, and I will tell you, we see it a bit in our discussions, our online discussions in our classes when we are introducing multiculturalism to our students or critical studies, where we will have white people who don't want to mention race. And they'll try and go about avoiding it, or even say things like we're in a post-racial society. And so I just put down the reference down at the bottom. But one of the big examples was that 2012 re-election of Barack Obama. But that's the same year that Trayvon Martin was shot. So the post-racial society that maybe you're seeing in the presidency isn't happening in the streets of Florida. Okay? So a couple other things, colorblind rhetoric patterns. So if you're reading about technology and you start seeing, if you're reading about technology or talking about technology or discussing about technology, you might see some of these rhetorical patterns. You might be talking or reading something and somebody will say, I'm not prejudiced, but there might be a flipping of where like reverse discrimination gets talked about instead, or no, that's not happening anymore. It's actually the white people who are being prosecuted. There also can be some diminutives where it's like, oh, think about the children, or people talking about it just might not make any sense whatsoever. Okay. These are some colorblind patterns. Some other two great authors and academics that I want to shout out to. One, Dr. Cheryl Matias, and she has two things, a book and an article, and we put them up in the book club so you can take a look at them. And she does she is fantastic at talking about white emotionality. Not only white emotionality, but and I wish I had the page quote that I could talk about, but how sometimes when these discussions happen, if they're happening face to face, that it's not even just emotionality that goes along with D'Angelo's white fragility, but the blank frozen face. Like, not, again, back to it being a rhetorical strategy, just not getting involved, not showing any emotion, and acting like this isn't happening. Now, Robin DiAngelo, last year, her book was just put out there, and it's called White Fragility. It is definitely worth a read. I think that you will find that when you're talking about intersectionality, Black girls and technology, women and technology, Asians and technology, you will find that if you are having this discussion with white people, you will probably experience some white fragility. And quite honestly, the book is worth a read, especially if you're going to be talking to white people about this intersection. And I will tell you that myself and the other female instructional designers at my college, we discuss this technology and these kinds of algorithmic things that happen a lot. And we found the more we talk to people about it, the less we see of this. Okay? Okay, so some things about technology and how this intersection and how this is kind of happening. I would say go ahead and don't go to Google, go to DuckDuckGo. Okay? And look for Rua Hagar. And I just pulled this off of her Twitter feed. But she is a valedictorian. She is originally from Iran. Her family are Baha'i, and so they actually, what they fled was they were refugees, and they came over to the United States. And she's a valedictorian in a Dallas school district. Wonderful. Okay, now she's been involved in some social justice, even in high school, which is fantastic. Okay, now the thing about this is when she handed over her speech to her principal. her principal read it, and she wanted to mention Trayvon Martin and Tamir Rice, two African American young men who were shot. And she wanted to mention this, and I would suggest you go to her Twitter, and now it's showing up in other social media places also, but there's a recording of her giving her valedictorian speech, right? Which is beautiful. And then at some point you see her principal, who's sitting next to her, kind of like do like this kind of thing, like the cut across the throat, you know, like the kind of movement thing. And then her mic goes out. Okay? And you see her, and you know, she does the heart thing, and you know, she just goes and sits down, and the school district ended up apologizing, sending a letter to apologize to her, because there was enough social media and enough publicity that of this, that it came out that it is likely that it was purposely cut.
Mm-hmm. Well, then you also get into free speech issues.
Oh yeah,
well.
First Amendment. Yeah, you're right. First Amendment goes here too. And so for all of us educators, if we are bringing this up in classes and, you know, courses and things like that, yeah, be ready for First Amendment, allowing people to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so one of the other examples in the book, and this is a horrible example, okay? And even the author of the book says that Google has changed it since then. But if you, and we have the link on the slides, but basically it was just a quick video. And Chris, if you click on that, we might even be able to see it. It was some kids, I shouldn't say kids, teenagers, just playing around and deciding to go to Google, the search engine, and put in, you know, 3 black teenagers, and they got mugshots. And then they did 3 white teenagers, and as you can see, they look like they're on vacation. Okay, or stock photos or something like that. Okay, so the next thing that that we'll be going on to, and now this was not mentioned in the book, and yes, you can start playing it. I won't narrate it, but I would suggest you go ahead and take a look at it. Now, this is up on YouTube, and basically the title says the soap dispenser at Facebook is racist. Okay, so I'm not going to make any comment here. Yes, I am. All I'm going to say is an example of technology. So just go ahead and look at it for yourself and see what you think. And there's also more of a description on it too. So really, when it comes to what we'd like you to think about, and when it comes to technology, is there a normalization of whiteness and masculinity? And we had you read the Google Manifesto and see how that differed from you know, the Declaration of Independence for cyberspace. And the thing, we have to keep thinking about this, okay? And now I'm just going to go over really quickly a couple of, they're called tests. Now, the first one, and please just only think of these as a heuristic. Think of these as things that you're likely to remember, and if you're doing, quite honestly, I train a lot of faculty, the faculty are likely to remember because they're memorable. Okay, that's all I have to say. Now, the first one, and you might have heard this one before, it's the Bechdel-Wallace test. And it is a measure of the representation of women in fiction. And it was done by a comics artist. And her question, and she did it with her friend, Wallace, and that's why it is now hyphenated. She wants her other friend to be recognized with this. And whether it's comics, whether it's a book, whether it's a movie, are there at least 2 women in it? Do the 2 women talk to each other about something other than a man that they are romantically linked to? And then, like it says, one of the other additions is that, and the women should have names too. Okay, so that's one of the tests. Now this next test, and this is really because we're the Games and Simulation Network, and I will tell you, okay, Pacific Rim, like if you're a gamer, wouldn't you like to get into one of those Jaegers? Wouldn't you? Wouldn't you like to control it? Wouldn't you? I mean, Pacific Rim has all the elements of an epic game, right? So this is another test, and this is also kind of tongue-in-cheek. It's called the Mako Mori test, and it was actually formulated by a Tumblr user, and it's kind of been put out there, and it asks whether or not a character in a movie, and it could go for a game too, whether the character has a narrative arc that's not supporting a man's story. And Mako Mori, she was tough, okay? She definitely was, but her story totally played into the two men. It wasn't like it was her story. It was like her story supported the establishment military guy, and her story supported, the rebel who's coming back, the rebel hero. And then in the second Pacific Rim, they just like killed her off in a helicopter crash. Not a heroic helicopter crash. It was just kind of like the beginning of the movie, poof, and she's gone. Okay, so one of the other tests, the Maki Mori test. Now this one, okay, if you have been seeing anything in any of the different news about the Central Park Five, horrible name for 5 young men who were unjustly accused, acquitted, and I'd suggest go watch the film on Netflix right now. It is called When They See Us. Now, the director of this series, she's done other wonderful work, and this is called the Duvernay test, and this was created by 2 people at The Guardian, and here's a series of 5 questions that you can ask when it comes to, a piece of media. Whether it be a book, whether it be a movie, you can go with a game, but it's more based for movies. But are there 2 named characters of color there? Do they have a dialogue? Are they not romantically involved with each other? Do they have any dialogue that isn't comforting or supporting a white character? And then the last one is one of them definitely not a magic stock character? And the magic stock character is somebody who's just brought in and who can magically solve the problems and then goes out, and who really isn't involved with much of what else is going on, and that's usually a pretty bad stereotype. So this is the test for the movies. Now, for us in academics, you can use this with your students, undergraduate or graduate students. We're trying to use it in the journal that we're involved in, and this is actually some of our verbiage from there. We ask if you submit work, you apply the Gray test. The Gray test is named after Dr. Koshana Gray, and this test kind of came up over blogs and discussions on Twitter. And she does great work when it comes to the intersectionality of race and gender identity when it comes to video games. But this is all about who are you citing when you're writing a paper. And to pass the Gray test, the journal article, or think about it, even your students, have to cite the scholarship of at least 2 women and 2 non-white authors. And it should be mentioned meaningfully in the body of the text. So a bit of discussion about it, not just a citation that goes like, that's so general that it really doesn't even show that you looked at whatever you're citing. And there's been further discussion on the Twitterverse, and it's been suggested that you change it to women or to non-binary scholars. So this is the Gray test. Now, what we have now, this is an interesting one. This is for science journalists. Okay, this one is called the Finkbeiner test, and this one was based off of a a journalist who won, a female journalist who won a science award. Now, this checklist, instead of being a positive checklist, this is a null or negative checklist. Will you write a science article about a woman, and you don't put it in there, you don't state that the first name and last name, she is a woman. You don't put that in that. You make no mention of her husband's job. You don't talk about her childcare arrangements. You do not put in the article how taken aback she was by the competitiveness in her field. You write the article without saying she's a role model for other women. And you do not have anything in that article that says she's the first woman too. Okay? So those are some of the tests that you can go ahead and use, and pick and choose. You're not going to use all of these. And some of them are a little sillier than others, but just look and see these. Now, there's one also for programmers. Does your project, and it was called the Bechdel test. They didn't put Wallace at the end of it. Okay, so for this one, a function has to be written by a woman developer, and the first one, and then it has to be written by a second. Okay, so all of this, what you've been seeing and reading in the book, and the author does get into this a bit, which is great, is back to neoliberalism. And that some of the projects that, like girls for coding and things like that, and also the ones that, especially that target Black girls, are these innovation projects, and they're really coming out of neoliberal science, technology, and digital innovation programs. Meaning that just about every tech company seems to find a foundation that will start looking, that they'll start gearing girls up for this. But really, they make it into just, and this is what the author says, that they make it into just a pipeline issue. If we just got enough students interested into this and we got it early, then this will be taken care of. But it's not looking at any systemic problems inside their companies or inside their industry, other than, oh, if we just catch the girls earlier, everything will be good.
All right, we'll go ahead and jump into questions for week 2. First thing is we'll call attention to the murdered and missing Indigenous women. Articles have been coming out. There's been a study released by the Canadian government, as well as a few agencies here in the US. So feel free to read those additional resources and get caught up in what's going on in this aspect of it. It is definitely one of the major emerging issues that we're seeing as well.
Oh, and Chris, if you'll just go back for a minute. Now, the thing about it, the reason why it really relates to us looking at algorithms of oppression and data, the thing about it is the data collection has been horrible, in the sense that the numbers aren't being reported. There's no cross-referencing like in the U.S. between local, state, and national levels. And we went ahead and we put some resources there that you can really go ahead and look at. And plus, there's been some legislative pieces that have come out recently about this. And the other big thing was May 4th was a Remembrance Day for murdered and missing Indigenous women, and it did not get a lot of coverage over practically any kind of place. And we happen to be, we're in the state of Colorado. We have states next to us that have large Indigenous Native American reservations and populations, including Denver has a large population when it comes to Native Americans, and this isn't being brought up. So we wanted to make sure it could be brought up. Again, it's another intersectionality, and it also gives you an opportunity to go and look and see what you can find. And can you find these things easily? How does Google look at it compared to how does DuckDuckGo look at this? And how could you even bring this into the curriculum in your classes?
Thank you. Next up, we have week 2 resources. So it's there on the website as well. And so the questions are, what pressures do you feel to engage with technologies? The National Day of Awareness for Missing and Murdered Native Women and Girls was observed on May 5th. Did you see anything about this in your social media or news streams? On May 5th, 2019, the National Day of Awareness for Missing and Murdered Native Women and Girls was observed. And as Kay said, do a search on Google or try DuckDuckGo. And what can you find on it? You can also use another search engine as well and compare and contrast what you find. And lastly, what are your thoughts on companies monetizing your data? Do you own the data or do they? And thanks again for watching this week. And we'll see you online. We look forward to your responses, and we'll get ready for week 3. Bye, everyone.